So smooth.
Enemy spotted! Sorry! Really needed this. You're not even a challenge.
Throwing smoke!
Unit reloading.
Man, you hurt, huh? Help me!
Incoming shock!
Throwing smoke!
Smoke out!
Still! Got it!
Throwing smoke! We need you on your feet!
I'm down!
Enemy spotted! You're officially out of options! Throwing smoke!
Come on, time to head out!
Eyes on target! Reeling out!
Promenade! Promenade!
I need this!
Enemy spotted!
Let's roll!
Shut them out!
take that.
Eyes on target!
Bye-bye, shithead!
Smoke out! Enemy spotted!
Oh yeah, practice makes perfect. Alright, who's next?
Sweet! Enemy marked! You're not even a challenge! Nailed that one! Almost hitting him! Nailed that one! Enemy spotted!
Can't crawl forever!
Eyes on target! Smoke out!
Let's make this quick.
I'm knocking him down. Sweet. What's in there? Eyes on target! Locked and loaded!
Needed that.
Blow your mind! Shot first! Frag out! Appreciate it! Look what I found! That's three! Yes, indeed! Enemy contact! How's that feel? Oh yeah! My bad. Throwing frag! Don't mind. Look what I found! I'm down! Enemy mark! Time to do some damage. Oh yeah! Let's do this!
Shit!
Drag out!
What, are you kidding me? Just what I need!
Eyes on target! Knock it off! Falling away. I got you, baby. I got you.
Time to get dirty.
Really needed this. Shot down! Perfect! Throwing fire! Oh yeah! Shut your mouth! Throwing smoke! Smoke out! Contact! Not too late to run!
You deserve it!
Throwing smoke!
Chaos!
Needed this. Target my mark! See you later! Needed this. Sniper. Grenade set. Yes, indeed! Look at them, just bleeding everywhere. How's that feel? That sounds done. Not for you. Flame out! I'm gonna give you a workout. I jammed it! Back to where you came from. Hustle!
Here we go!
Smoke out! Needed this. Look what I found!
Target my mark!
Oh, whoa! My bad! This won't stop us!
Seems fair.
Back to where you came from!
Throwing smoke. Go back here! Enemy marked! Got it!
No. Come while it lasted. This might sting a little. Fire in the hole!
I'm a big fan!
Miss!
Incoming smoke!
Time for some payback! You're not even a challenge. Sweet. I need a new assistant.
Get a refill. Don't worry. You'll be dead very soon.
You're not even...
Enemy contact!
Not too late to run. Sweet.
Get well. Can't wait to try this.
You're blocking my shot!
Just what I needed.
Got nowhere to go.
Good to go! Didn't like that.
What's the matter? You hurt?
Barry, no! You're done! Yeah, that's my platform! Oh, yeah. Get all ready? Contact!
In the Queen's name, kill goes.
Incoming snow! This'll ruin their day. Let's see how tough. Hard.
The closest I can come to each one of us is the deepest reality and the deepest truth and the deepest love that is possible. Most of us are spending our lives completely ignorant of who we really are. Most of my colleagues, they assume that space-time is fundamental, which is false. They assume that brain activity somehow gives rise to conscious experiences, which is false. And what they're missing is this. Space and time and objects in space and time do not exist when they're not perceived. We've mistaken a limit of our headset for an insight into the nature of reality.
There's that old saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one sees it, does it still make a sound? But you're saying, like, does the tree even actually exist?
That's exactly right. The question then is, what's
Smoke out! Fire in the hole!
You're okay.
Enemy marked!
Blew your mind.
Oscar Morgan! Sit down! Enemy marked!
See you later. Dibs.
Contact!
Got your head high. See you later.
Ready to rock! Bring it! Enemy contact! Out of the way! Yeah, that's right! Incoming smoke!
It's outside of our space lanes. We are the. But on the other hand,
a piece of reality, but rather our brains construct reality as a user interface, almost like a desktop screen that is to a computer, in order to help us navigate the world. And it's with that, therefore, that reality is much more illusory than we potentially think it is, and that we may be even living in a simulation of sorts. Today, we're going to be exploring these ideas at depth and exploring the implications that they have about our understanding of the world and our place in it. Dr. Donald Hoffman, thank you for being here.
my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Yeah, it's my honor. I've been really loving just digesting more of your content, your books, and it's so mind-bending and opening. And I would love for you just to start out with like what the technical question that you and your team set out to kind of answer as you started on the journey that you're on.
Well, so there's a couple strands to our research. One is evolution, and what does it entail about sensory systems? And does evolution shape sensory systems to see reality as it is? That's one strand of our research. And another strand is the question of consciousness. And can we as scientists get a mathematically precise model of consciousness and of its relationship to physical objects like brains and neurons and so forth? And does consciousness arise from the brain, or what is that relationship? So those are the two strands: evolution and what it shapes sensory systems to see, and consciousness and its relationship to the physical world. And our work on evolution has focused on this technical question:
Smoke out.
does evolution with natural selection shape sensory systems to see truths about objective reality, true structures of objective reality? And most of us would say, well, of course. It's all about fitness, and surely seeing the truth is going to make you more fit. And it seems like just a no-brainer. And many of my colleagues think that. But when you look at Darwin's theory with mathematical precision, as we can with the tools of evolutionary game theory, which was John Maynard Smith brought the tools of game theory, which is mathematical theory, together with Darwin's ideas to give us evolutionary game theory. So we can actually now not just talk informally about what evolution does, we can actually write down mathematical equations and run simulations and so forth. And so I decided with my graduate students, including Justin Mark, Brian Marion, and others, to address this question, it's a nice, clean technical question. So what is the probability that natural selection would shape our sensory systems, any sensory systems, to see any truths about the structure of reality? And by structure, I mean, for example, maybe reality has some distance metric, things are far apart. So what is the probability that it tells us truths about distances or orders, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a total order? If the reality has some total order, what's the probability that evolution would shape our sensory systems to see that total order? And topologies and other things you can do. So we went at it, and I thought, maybe evolution will do things on the cheap. And so maybe every once in a while it won't tell us the truth, and because you don't want to waste capital. But when we got into it, I was surprised. It turned out that the math was very, very clear. There are selection pressures against seeing the truth, period. In fact, our theorems basically tell us that the probability that any sensory system of any organism has ever been shaped to see any aspect of objective reality, any structure of objective reality, is precisely zero. Precisely zero. Zero. And intuitively, that sounds crazy, but intuitively, the reason is, I'll give a couple reasons. First, evolution shapes sensory systems to guide adaptive behavior. Any evolutionary biologist would agree with that. And basically what I'm saying is, yes, it shapes sensory systems to guide adaptive behavior, period. It doesn't shape them in addition to see truths. And that seems so counterintuitive. That's really what evolutionary theory is telling us. And Steven Pinker talked about this in a paper of his, also in a book called How the Mind Works, but in a paper called So How Does the Mind Work? And he outlines evolutionary reasons in that beautiful paper about, why there would be selection pressures against true beliefs and true perceptions. So Steve's work is brilliant, but he left open the door that we might have some true perceptions about everyday objects. So that was, my focus was about those everyday objects, like tables and chairs and the moon and the sun and so forth. And there basically, Pinker's logic continues even for those objects. And we don't see the truth even there for everyday normal-sized objects. So I'll give a brief technical reason why. And then I'll give an informal. Technically, evolution, as formulated by evolutionary game theory, think of it as a game. And to win a game, you have to get more points, right, than your competition, for example. Enough points to get to the next level or something. So in evolutionary theory, the points are what they call payoff functions. So if I'm a lion and I'm hungry, a cow or a steak would have great payoff for me as a lion. If I'm the same lion and I'm full and I want to mate, well, a cow has no payoff for me at all, right? So there are these payoff functions that tell you roughly the evolutionary points you're going to get, which correspond to your chances of reproduction in evolution. And so these are mathematical functions. They're functions from the world, whatever the world is. The world, its state, the organism, like the lion, its particular sensory systems and its particular physiological state, like hungry or sated, and the action, feeding, fighting, fleeing, and mating, the famous 4Fs. So it's a complicated function from the world into payoff values. Say 0 was a bad payoff to 100, which is a great payoff. And it doesn't matter what the numbers are. Let's say 0 to 100 or 0 to 1,000. And so what we do is we actually analyze, do those fitness payoff functions actually contain information about the structures of reality? Mathematically, we'd say, are they homomorphisms of the structures of reality? That is, do they preserve these structures? And so that's what I'm working with Chetan Prakash more recently. So I did simulations, but then when we got the hint that this was what was going on, I went with a wonderful friend of mine, long-term collaborator, Chetan Prakash, who's a mathematician. And so Chetan has proven these theorems. I'm not blaming him. And what we found is that the probability is precisely zero. There are some payoff functions that will preserve objective reality structures. It's not that there aren't any. But when you take the ratio of the number that preserve the structures of reality versus all of them, the total number of payoff functions, that ratio goes to zero as the number of states in the world and the number of payoff functions gets larger.
So would you say that what we see is connected to the structure of reality, but that the structure of reality is made up of something completely different than what we're experiencing?
Yes, it's connected, but very, very different. And so here, the informal, now I'll talk about the informal mode that you mentioned earlier on, which is like the user interface on your computer. Right? If you're writing an email and the icon on your desktop is blue and rectangular for some email you're writing, that doesn't mean the email itself is blue and rectangular. And if the icon's in the middle of the screen, it doesn't mean your email is in the middle of your computer. I mean, anybody who thought that just misunderstands the desktop interface. It's not there to resemble the truth. It's there to hide the truth, which is diodes and resistors and magnetic fields and voltages. You're actually toggling millions of voltages in a precise sequence to write that email. If you had to do that, good luck. If you had to do it directly, if you had to see the reality and do that directly, you never send your email out. So the user interface allows you to interact with reality and control the reality with the kind of precision you need, even though you're utterly ignorant. Most of us have no idea about the voltages that we're toggling. We're completely ignorant about the reality that we're actually interacting with. And so that's what evolution did. Evolution gave us our senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, and so forth, as a virtual headset, so to speak. We got a headset to play the game of life, and that headset hides reality, but allows us to control objective reality in the ways that we need. So it's like if you're playing, like the Grand Theft Auto, VR kind of analogy. Like if you're playing a multiplayer game, I might be playing with someone in China or India or whatever around the world, and I could look over with my headset on, looking over, see a red Ferrari, and my friend in China might also say, "Oh yeah, I see a red Ferrari." But of course, the red Ferrari is only there when I render it. When I look, the pixels appear in my headset. I then see a red Ferrari, but there's no red Ferrari in the supercomputer. And if I look away, my friend in China might say, "Well, I still see a red Ferrari." Well, she's seeing her red Ferrari, the one that she's creating in her conscious experience from her headset. So we have the feeling, we could have the feeling that the red Ferrari is always there, but in fact, there is no red Ferrari anywhere except in the moment of someone's perception.
So this is really fascinating, and this conversation is going to be very trippy. The Nobel Prize that was kind of recently awarded for proving that local realism is false is speaking to this, right? It's like there's that old kind of saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one sees it, does it still make a sound? But you're saying, like, does the tree even actually exist if no one's perceiving it? So
That's right.
What are the powerful implications of proving that local realism is false? What does that mean?
Right. So that's a good point to move to, because someone might say, well, whole thing's talking about evolution, but this is what you're talking about objects in space-time. That's not true. Evolutionary theories, bailiwick, that's physicists. Surely the physicist will put you in place and tell you that you're full of it. Well, but as you said, the Nobel Prize last year in physics went to 3 physicists who had done a lot of empirical work actually verifying the predictions of quantum theory, that local realism is false. So Anton Zeilinger, John Clauser, and Alan Aspect were the winners. And so local realism has 2 parts, the local and the real. Realism is the statement that physical objects, like the electron or proton, have definite values of their properties, like position and momentum and spin, even if they're not observed. That's realism. So things exist and have their properties even if they're not observed, which we all intuitively say, of course. And then local is the claim that those properties have influences that propagate through space-time no faster than the speed of light. Einstein's got speed of light. So that's local realism. And it turns out that local realism is false. And Clauser did the first experiments decades ago. And didn't get the Nobel Prize because this is the kind of stuff where you really want to nail it down. So then Aspect did some more, and then Zeilinger did some more. So after decades and decades, even the conservative body like the Nobel Committee says, okay, game's up. Local realism is false. Now, some people will say that this doesn't rule out superdeterminism. We can talk about that if you want. But local, I think it's very, very clear in the quantum formalism that objects do not have definite values of their properties when they're not observed. Now, some people will try to wiggle out and say, well, that's for microscopic stuff, subatomic particles and so forth, but tables and chairs, that's a different story. Well, there's no one's given a principled account that says that first, quantum theory holds at all scales. So it's just false to say that quantum theory is the theory of the small and something else is a theory. It's just false. Quantum theory is a theory. Quantum field theory is the theory of physics, especially and also gravity. So you can't say local realism is false only for small particles, but not for everyday macroscopic objects. We can talk about the collapse of the wave function and so forth if you want. We'll go into the weeds on it a little bit more, but if we don't want to go into the weeds, I'll just say this is true at all scales. And so what I'm saying then is that evolution by natural selection independently agrees with what a physicist just won the Nobel Prize for. It says that what you see is not the truth. You render the objects that you see on the fly, including all their properties. And that's why local realism is false. The reason it doesn't have the properties is because it doesn't even exist. The moon exists when you perceive it. And when you don't perceive it, it doesn't exist.
So that's where I wanted to go next, because you look at these celestial entities like the moon or planets. The fact that they wouldn't exist when no conscious mind is perceiving them is a very baffling idea. How could something, you spoke to how this works at all scales, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a chair or if it's the moon. But I suppose, how do you define consciousness then? Because could you say then that the moon has a consciousness of its own? What about, is there like a scale of sentience for animal life that would perceive the moon? Can you break down more how it's actually possible that the moon doesn't exist when we don't perceive it?
Right, it's mind-bending. I think a lot of help comes if you think about the virtual reality headset metaphor. Almost all of your questions will get resolved if you think in terms of. Okay. So just imagine that I'm in a virtual world that has a moon and the sun in virtual reality, but it's all in my headset. And I have it's a multiplayer game, so other people are, maybe I'm playing tennis, for example, and I have the tennis ball, and I'm hitting, and my partner hits the tennis ball back. Well, now I could play a game and say, well, but the tennis ball is real because, look, I'm going to take the tennis ball, drop it. My partner, Mary, do you still see the tennis ball? Yeah, it's still there, it's on the ground. That proves that the tennis ball was there. Well, no, it doesn't. Mary just had her pixels in her headset. There's some supercomputer that's coordinating everything, but there's no green tennis ball inside the supercomputer. And so any questions you have, anything that's stumping you, just think about a multiplayer virtual reality game, take your question into that, and you will then see how to answer your own question. I usually like to give that metaphor now because people send me emails all the time, and I find myself always saying, okay, here's the virtual reality headset metaphor. When you think about it in that case, you'll get the right answer every time. So, but now your question was also about what is consciousness, and for example, we might say that a rock isn't conscious, but maybe an amoeba, I don't know, maybe an ant, I don't know, but maybe by the time I get to a mouse, possibly conscious, a cat. Yeah. That tends to be our intuition. But again, that isn't listening to what our best science is telling us. Space and time, and objects in space and time, do not exist when they're not perceived. It's just a headset. So the distinction that we make between living and non-living is not principled. It's an artifact of the limitations of our headset. The distinction we make between conscious and unconscious is not principled. It's also an artifact. I'll give you an example to to bring that home. Suppose you're on a Zoom discussion with some friends, and you see the face of your friend. And there's some pixels associated, and then also a wall or a chair. Well, you might say, well, some of the pixels are conscious. The pixels related, those are conscious pixels, and the pixels for the desk and the chair are not conscious. Well, that's silly. Pixels are just pixels. Sometimes they give you insights about consciousness in the person's face and their expression, and sometimes they don't when you're with the chair and the desk and so forth. But pixels are neither conscious nor unconscious, and well, this is all a headset. So all you're seeing are the pixels. When you're looking around, you're just seeing the pixels, and the distinction you make between living and non-living, conscious and unconscious, is not principled. It's an artifact of the limitations of your headset. So in my view, see, the physicists have said, quantum theory tells us that physical particles don't have properties. And then high-energy theoretical particle physicists like David Gross, Nima Ahmed, and others they're at the very forefront of physics, looking, okay, well, what's next? What they're saying, and this is a quote, is space-time is fundamental. Space-time itself is not fundamental. It's been space and time under Newton was the foundation of reality, and then since Einstein in 1905, space-time has been in science the fundamental reality. But now, in 2023, it's over. It's had a good ride. Space and time have had a good ride. They were a very, very useful, assumption. But now science has moved on. Space-time is not fundamental. And physicists are finding new structures beyond space-time, something like decorated permutations or mathematical structures beyond space-time. But they don't know what this means. They're finding mathematical structures, but what is it beyond space-time? So what I'm pursuing with this other strand of our research is the idea that consciousness is fundamental. And consciousness is the reality beyond space-time. In fact, space-time just is a pretty trivial headset that certain consciousnesses, probably not most, probably very few consciousnesses use. So I'm proposing a complete inversion of how we think about space and time and consciousness. Most of us think of space and time as fundamental, and you are a little body, 100 to 200 pound, 300 pound body in space-time, and 3 pounds of brain create consciousness. So that's the standard view. But that doesn't match our best science now. Our best science is saying space-time is not fundamental. Local realism is false. Space-time is just a headset. Whose headset? I'm proposing, let's turn it around. Consciousness is fundamental. Space-time is a trivial data structure, a trivial headset. And it's only got 4 dimensions, 3 of space, 1 of time. In string theory, maybe 10 or 11. Why not 20 billion? I mean, actually space-time falls apart at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. It falls, that's what physicists will say. It doesn't even have any meaning, operational meaning, past 10 to the minus 33. No, so not 10 to the minus 33 trillion centimeters, just 10 to the minus 33. The thing falls apart. So we thought that space and time are the fundamental reality. They're a cheap headset, a really, really cheap headset.
A very enchanting cheap headset, right?
Yes.
It feels very real.
That's all we know.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just opened up so much here, and I'm so excited to spend the rest of this podcast breaking down, digesting a lot of this, especially in the later part of this conversation, exploring some of the moral, ethical implications of all this. But first, I want to kind of go back to this distinction between consciousness and what's alive and what's not. We, I think, like to kind of separate our thinking from a human is conscious, maybe a rock isn't conscious, certainly less conscious. Is an electron alive? Would you say that an electron is alive or conscious, or is alive and conscious 2 separate things in your view?
Well, so when I look at you, I just have a visual experience of a human body. That visual experience is not alive or dead. That's just my visual experience, and it's not you. You are a conscious entity, and my experience of you is just my experience through my headset. And so I would say that the image that I have of you, my perception, that is neither alive nor not alive. It's just a portal to your consciousness, and it's it's one of the best portals I have. The human form in my perception is one of the best portals I have into consciousness. The cat form is a portal, but not quite as good. I can tell when my cat is hungry, or if I've petted it enough and it's had enough, But with an ant, a little bit about it's alive for sure, and a little bit about what it likes and dislikes. So, but when I get to a rock, you might say, well, it's totally unconscious. No, it just means that my interface gave up. So the idea is I'm always interacting with consciousness. My headset has limitations. With humans, it gives me some, but not very good. Actually, you could live with someone for many, many years and still have lots of stuff you don't know about them, about their conscious experience, how they see the world. You can still be surprised. So we've mistaken a limit of our headset for an insight into the nature of reality. I see a rock and it looks pretty dumb to me. Well, it's not because I'm interacting with a dumb reality. It's because my headset has to give up. It's simplifying things. It's dumbing things down. So when I'm interacting, so I'll be very, very clear. When I pick up a rock, I am interacting with consciousness. And I'm not saying the rock is conscious, right? I'm not saying the rock is conscious. The rock is just my experience. So for example, let's do the VR metaphor again with Grand Theft Auto. When I grab the steering wheel of my car, right, I'm doing something inside the computer, but there's no steering wheel inside the computer.
Right.
So that's the key thing to keep. I'm always, in that metaphor, I'm always interacting with diodes and resistors and voltages. That's what I'm always doing. Sometimes I see those diodes and resistors as a steering wheel. Sometimes I see them as a Ferrari. Sometimes I see them as my arm, my avatar arm. But I'm always interacting with the diodes and resistors in that metaphor. So now backing it into it, I'm saying consciousness is the fundamental engine. It's the supercomputer behind everything. And everything that I see is my interaction with that engine, with consciousness. But my headset dumbs things down. So with you, I'm getting insight into the consciousness that I'm interacting with my cat, but with a rock not. But it's just wrong to say the rock is unconscious and your body is conscious. Those are just, put it this way, the body that I'm perceiving is not you. It's just the body that I'm perceiving. And for all I know, if you actually knew what I was perceiving of you, you would say, no, that's not what I think I look like at all.
Yep. I mean, so much of the world, and I'm excited to dive into this a little bit later, so much division and separation comes from the tightly held beliefs of our perceptions being the absolute truth, right? And so
that's right.
This view of consciousness being fundamental is a completely 180 shift from how most people even approach the hard problem, right? And
absolutely.
We think that at some stage of neuronal development, we turn that dial enough and then we get conscious experience by virtue of unconscious complexity just kind of developing. But if consciousness is fundamental, then you're coming at the problem, if you want to call it that, from the completely opposite angle.
That's exactly right. So most of my colleagues who are studying consciousness, good friends and colleagues, and they're brilliant, but most of them are physicalists. They assume that space-time is fundamental, which is false. They assume that reductionism is true, which is false. They assume that brain activity, or, for example, complicated enough artificial intelligence systems, the right activity in computers, somehow gives rise to conscious experiences. So that's the standard view. And again, these are my friends and colleagues. They're brilliant. But they've failed so far to explain any specific conscious experience. There's no scientific theory today, none, that can explain a specific conscious experience and how it arises from the brain activity. Orchestrated collapse of neuronal microtubule quantum states, or integrated information, or some global workspace architecture. If you ask them, and I've done this, these are my friends. I'll ask them informally, I'll ask them at conferences when I want to put them on the spot. I'll just say, so great, you have a theory of consciousness, so what specific conscious experience can you explain? What is the integrated information theory pattern, what they call the Q shape, that must be the taste of chocolate and couldn't be the smell of garlic? What is it? Or whatever one you want. Can you give me one? No. And you know, I've done this with Stuart Hameroff and with this Hammer Penrose model. Stuart, can you give me a specific conscious experience that you can explain? And I had to push 2 or 3 minutes. He hemmed and hawed, and I finally, Stuart, can you give me one? Finally, I had to say, no, you can't. And it's not because they're dumb; they're brilliant. But you can't boot up consciousness from space-time. It's just not possible. And so, spiritual traditions have been saying this for thousands of years. Right? They've been saying that consciousness is fundamental in space and time. They haven't used the term headset, but it's maybe an illusion or something. And Plato has the allegory of the cave. And so the spiritual traditions have, in some sense, been there for quite a while, but they haven't had the tools of mathematics. They've had only imprecise language to work. And they also haven't had the tools of experimental psychology, for example, or experimental science more generally. So we're coming to a nice convergence for humanity. Spiritual traditions have been saying this for thousands of years, but haven't had the tools to make it rigorous. And they've suffered for that, because when you only have words, the words, they'll say the words are just pointers. The Tao, the Ching starts off the very first sentence is the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. Once you understand that, then it's fine. Then you can read the rest of the book and realize don't take this stuff literally. Just take it as pointers to the truth inside you, the consciousness inside you. And any good spiritual tradition will make that distinction clear up front. But the followers have famously and terribly misunderstood that, and we end up with religious wars, persecutions, killings, and so forth. And a lot of that comes because we've had imprecise language, and it's easy to become dogmatic and to not understand the limits. So what we have coming with science now is the scientists are now saying, okay, we need to look outside of space-time. And the spiritual traditions are saying, well, great, we've been here for quite a while. Come join us. But now the scientists have these incredible tools. They thought that they were studying reality. They've been studying their headset. We've been studying the space-time headset since Galileo. But we got good enough that we actually discovered that it's just a headset, right? It's actually the tools of science that have forced us to recognize that space-time is just a headset.
Which is an incredible achievement.
It's unbelievable. And that's what is so beautiful about the science, is that the theories are mathematically precise, so that they tell you two things. They tell you the scope, the power of your theory with mathematical precision. But even more importantly, they tell you the limits. This is how far your theory goes, and then it stops. And that's the point of mathematical theories. They tell you the scope and the limits of the foundational concepts of your theories. And so going forward now, I think that science will get a really mathematically precise theory of consciousness. And I'm working with my team. We can talk about the one I'm working on if you want. But I should make a point here that many philosophers have argued against what I'm saying, right? They'll say, look, and this has been published in scientific philosophy journals, for example. So a number of philosophers have said, Hoffman is saying that he's using evolutionary game theory to show that organisms and resources, objects in space and time, are not fundamental. They're an illusion, that we don't see reality as it is. Well, now Darwin, in his theory, was proposing real physical objects competing for real physical resources in space and time. So the philosophers will say, well, now look, now either the mathematics of evolutionary game theory faithfully represents Darwin's theory, or it doesn't. Now, if it doesn't, you couldn't possibly use it to show that space and time and physical objects aren't fundamental. And if it does faithfully represent Darwin's theory, then it wouldn't contradict Darwin's theory. And Darwin's theory assumes space and time and physical objects. So either way, you're in a bad situation, what they will call an unenviable dialectical position. The philosopher would like to use that language. So an undesirable dialectical position that you put yourself in. Either way, you can't possibly. So they're saying basically you couldn't use evolutionary game theory in principle to show that space and time and physical objects are fundamental. And what they're missing is this. The mathematics, as it's used in science, is built on the assumptions of the theory. And it shows you the scope of those assumptions. And there will be limits. No, there is no theory of everything. In principle, there is no scientific theory of everything. Because you always have to have assumptions. And so you have a theory of everything except for your assumptions, but the assumptions are the miracles of your theory. Now, so what happens then is, just to make a real clear example of this, because this really seems to have grasped the imagination of a lot of philosophers and people who are philosophically minded. They think I'm in a logically bad situation. I've shot myself in the foot logically. Einstein and his theory of space-time. He had the intuitions about space and time and gravity warping space and time. He broke them down in mathematics, right? So, for example, in 1907, he had the idea that if he was in an elevator and was falling, he was in an elevator standing on a scale, and he weighs 150 pounds. And then you cut the cord of the elevator, it goes in free fall. All of a sudden, Einstein realized I weigh nothing. And that was his big insight. That was the big insight that led to his theory of gravity. It took him several years, until like 1915, to actually turn it into mathematics. Well, so now that we have Einstein's intuition and his own mathematics to make it formal, and also his mathematics for quantum theory, when we put them together, we find out that space-time ceases to have any operational meaning at what's called the Planck scale, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, 10 to the minus 43 seconds. So there we see that Einstein himself, with his own mathematics that were formalizing his own intuitions, comes up with mathematics that tells him the limits of his intuition. The limits are 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, 10 to the minus 43 seconds. Space-time no longer makes sense. That's the way science works. So it's not that the mathematics will always confirm and show you that your theory has infinite extension and everything is right. It will tell you the limits. So, and what we have to do then in science, and this is maybe a really key point, our theories will tell us the limits. A good theory. A bad theory won't. It's not precise enough, it won't tell you. But a really good theory will tell you this is the limit. But it can't tell you what's next. It can't tell you. So scientists then have to take the leap. A creative leap, and it's usually the younger generation, right? The old guys, they die with their theories, and the younger generation then makes the new leaps into. And so you have to make a leap. Most of our leaps are wrong. Most of them are not interesting. But every once in a while you get something that's interesting. How do you know that it's interesting? Well, here's where our old theories. For example, in the case of space-time, physicists are now, just in the last 10 years, literally just in the last 10 years, finding new structures utterly outside of space-time, completely outside of the headset. But they can project them back into the headset and see what they predict inside the headset. And there, if you make predictions that aren't matching our theories inside space and time, and the data that we have inside space-time, then whatever you propose outside of space-time, bye-bye. That's wrong. So our theories, our current theories inside space-time, can give us a thumbs down on our leaps outside of space-time. Saying, no, dumb, bad, you got this wrong, you got that wrong. And they may give you some hints. Maybe they might help your intuitions about where to look, but they can't tell you what's going to be out there. So you always have to make this creative leap, project back into space-time or into the domain of the theory, and then see, thumbs up or thumbs down. So that's how science works. You take your intuitions, make them mathematically precise. 99% of the time, you're not even interested. It's just wrong. But every once in a while, you get lucky. You get an Einstein or a Newton or something like that, and you get something that is not right, but it's interesting. It's actually it accounts for a lot of data. It's doing something right. And then when you find the limits of that, and then you have to create a leap, get a deeper theory. The older theories then say thumbs down most of the time, But every once in a while they'll say, can't put a thumbs down, so maybe you should pursue that. Maybe that one's worth pursuing. So that's sort of the top one.
All right, lots to unpack there as well. Before we move on to some of these topics in further depth, I want to kind of just go back to how fitness beats truth and how evolution essentially hid the truth of objective reality so that we could continue on this reproduction evolutionary wheel for its own evolutionary purposes. So can you speak to just the process of how what we perceive is created in our VR headset and how we really just see what we need to see in order long enough in order to survive and procreate?
Right. So just looking at evolutionary theory by itself. So forgetting my consciousness stuff for a moment. So when we talk about science, we have to sort of talk about what model am I going to be.
Yeah.
So I'll now go back into space-time. So I'm now thinking inside of space-time. I'm using the tools of evolution. Okay. So that's the model I'm in. So evolution then will say things, very, very interesting thing. It will say, for example, that our perceptions are driven by our needs for food, mating, and so forth. And also to do things on the cheap, right? For every calorie that you spend in perception, for example, you need to go out there, kill something and eat it to get those calories, and then you put yourself at risk. So there's going to be selection pressures to do things on the cheap, to do them fairly quickly, and we get what are called satisfying solutions from an evolutionary theory. You just need a solution that's good enough most of the time. Just better than the competition, basically. You just have to be a little bit better than. So it's not that you're not. It's not really survival of the perfectly fit. It's just the survival of the fitter. It's actually better to say the survival of the fitter than the fittest. You don't need to be as fit as possible. You just need to be, as long as you're better than competition, that's good enough from an evolutionary point of view. So from that point of view, the selection pressure is really just driven by the nature of your competition. And we do things on the cheap. So I'll give a fun example. So there's this beetle in the outback of Australia, jewel beetle. And the beetles are dimpled, glossy, and brown. The males fly, the females are flightless. The males fly around looking for females. And if the male finds one that looks eligible, he alights and mates. But in the outback, there's also Homo sapiens, and the males of the species tend to drink these beers that in these bottles they call stubbies, little brown bottle, and the guys tend to throw them out in the desert. And it turns out that these bottles are dimpled, glossy, and just the right shade of brown to catch the fancy of the jewel beetle, the male jewel beetle. And so these male jewel beetles land on the bottles and try to mate. And the real females are not interested compared to these bottles. So it's the male and female for the bottle kind of situation, but for beetles. And so what's interesting is these male beetles have full body contact with the bottle, and they still are agog with this bottle. and so
Leaving the woman for the bottle.
Leaving the woman, the female for the bottle. So that gives you a real clue about what's going on in evolution. You think about it, those beetles have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. The males have found females and successfully mated. You would think that evolution had taught the male what a female really is. Apparently not. Apparently what evolution gave the male was a little hack. A female is anything dimpled, glossy, and brown. The bigger the better. That was what, and that's all evolution. Something like that is all evolution gave. That's all the insight the males had about the females. The females might complain about them. They don't have very little insight into them at all. But that's what evolution does. It gives you just what you need to survive long enough to reproduce. And as long as there weren't these glossy bottles in the environment, the little algorithm looked for something dimpled, glossy and brown, the bigger the better, was just fine for that's all the insight he had into a female. That's all he needed, and that was enough to get the next generation going. But one bottle, or a few bottles in the desert, is enough to actually drive the whole thing, the whole species to extinction. So that gives you a clue about how evolution works. We have these simple tricks and hacks. In humans and other species, there are things called supernormal stimuli. So again, I'm just speaking about just evolution on its own terms, which is a fun. I love evolution, evolutionary biology, and evolutionary game theory. Even though I think it's not, since space-time is not fundamental, and evolution by natural selection is a theory inside space-time. Ultimately, evolution by natural selection is not a deep theory. It's only a headset theory. But it's a beautiful headset theory, and I use it a lot, and this is a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to a deeper theory outside that will project down to evolutionary theory. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I'm excited to spend more time outside the headset.
Yeah, that's right. But inside the headset, there are things called supernormal stimuli. Once you understand how, so for example, the big bottle was a supernormal stimulus for the beetle, the male beetles. He liked the beetles liked the bottle more than the real thing, more than a real female. So that was what we call a supernormal stimulus. And for there are some birds that like bigger eggs, and you put a big rock, and they will ignore their own eggs and sit on the rock, and they never figure it out. So that's a supernormal stimulus for them. And with humans, makeup. When women put on makeup for men, it works because of supernormal stimulus. You put red lipstick on, you're seeing lips that never occur in that color in nature. And yet, if it's done right, if you don't go to the clown, the level of the clown, done right, it's a supernormal stimulus that actually makes you look better than anything that's real. And so in humans, we use makeup and clothing and so forth to tap in, unconsciously, into the supernormal stimuli. And some of the consulting I've done for companies is to be explicit about it and help them in selling jeans and marketing and so forth. Once you know the stuff, you can play people.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. Can you dive into how the role of conscious agents and how that plays into your theory? Just to explain what that is. What does that mean when you say conscious agents?
Right. So the question then is, what's outside of our space-time headset? And no one knows. The physicists are looking, but they're just looking and they're finding mathematical structures.
Please get over here.
And so I'm proposing with my team that consciousness is fundamental, and that space and time is just a user interface, that some consciousness is used. And so now as a scientist, not enough to say it's consciousness, right? You have to say, okay, here's the mathematical model. There's got to be an absolutely precise mathematical model. So we've published several papers where we have this mathematical model we call the theory of conscious agents. And those who are interested in it, I've got a paper called Objects of Consciousness. You just Google my name and Objects of Consciousness. You'll find it online, it's free. And also Fusions of Consciousness. So Google my name and Fusions of Consciousness. And you can see the mathematical model. But the idea, so we have what's called a Markovian dynamics. So it's a dynamical system of conscious agents. And the intuition, so I'm not going to go into the math unless you want to go into that. The intuition is, think of it as like a vast social network, like Twitter, now called X, but I'll call it Twitter for now. So, millions of Twitter users, billions of tweets. No one can keep up with it, but it's a vast social network. So, and that's our mathematical model of consciousness is like that. It's a bunch of conscious agents in a network interacting, tweeting, and following tweets and retweeting and so forth, all the kinds of interactions that you would have. So it's a vast social network of interacting conscious agents, but with an interesting twist, and that is that interacting conscious agents themselves form a new conscious agent. And ultimately, there's just one conscious agent. So there's you can think of it as a social network, but you can also equivalently and with mathematical precision think about it as a single conscious agent. Yeah, it's really quite fun. And the fun thing for me is, and this is the work we're doing right now, the physicists have found these structures outside of space-time, something called decorated permutations. Permutations are like shuffling cards, you change the order. Decorated permutations is just a little mathematical thing on that. And if people are interested, we can talk about it. But that's as far as they've gotten in terms of the depth. There's no dynamics. And so we had this Markovian dynamics. You say, okay, we have this social network of consciousness. And the physicists have already gone outside of space-time. They found these decorated permutations. So can we connect our Markovian social network of consciousness to these decorated permutations? And so I just said, well, there must be some mathematics that's already been done about Markov chains mapping into decorated permutations. And we looked and there wasn't. So we did it. And that's the Fusions of Consciousness paper that I mentioned. We published it in January. And it's a new contribution to mathematics where we show a canonical way to take a social network of Markovian dynamics of consciousness and project it into decorated permutations, which then allows us, because the physicist then can take decorated permutations into space-time, into, for example, scattering, particle scattering at Large Hadron Collider and other colliders. So we have a map now from a dynamics of conscious agents through decorated permutations to scattering processes, and that's where we're headed right now. Is we want to test our theory of conscious agents against scattering data inside from particle colliders. And the place we want to look at first is inside the proton. The tiniest places we've looked are inside the proton. And when you look inside of a proton, at the largest scale, there's 2 up quarks and a down quark. But as you look smaller and smaller, you see a bunch of quark-antiquark and gluons, which are the particles that sort of bind them together. And then when you get really high resolution space and time, it's all gluons. It's just a vast ocean of gluons. And qualitatively, we think we can get that. So our theory of consciousness can actually, when we project it through decorated permutations into space-time, I think we're going to get that. So what our goal is to not only get it qualitatively, but to get the precise, what they call momentum distributions of the quarks and gluons. And the reason we're doing that, partly science, you've got to show that you make empirical predictions. But why the proton, right? Why not the brain? We have all these neural correlates of consciousness in the brain. Surely we want to make connections between our theory of consciousness and the brain, so why in the world am I going after protons? And the reason is the brain is too complicated. You have to start with where the data is really clean and where you can make an absolutely precise prediction. So I want to get to the brain. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. I was in the brain and cognitive science department at MIT. That's where I got my doctorate. So I'm very interested in the cognitive neuroscience of consciousness. But that's a little bit later on. We need to get inside the proton, then go to the atomic nucleus, show that we can model that, then the whole atom, and then molecules, and then bigger molecules, and then climb our way up to neurons and then the brain. So I mean, it's on the agenda, but maybe not in my lifetime. I mean, that's quite a bit of work there. But the idea is to have a theory. We do have a mathematically precise theory of conscious agents. We do now have a precise mapping onto decorated permutations, which map precisely into, for example, particles and elementary particles of the standard model of physics. So now is the time for the next couple of years to actually do experimental tests, computational experiments to show that we can actually get that. If we get it, doesn't mean that we're right. It just means that we haven't been shown that we're wrong.
When you describe this network of conscious agents that are coming together that could also be perceived as one large kind of mind, it's really interesting to me, and it points at how reality is so mysterious and much more vast ways than we normally would think of it. For simulation theory, people typically think of it from this kind of Newtonian, when space-time is fundamental and technology advances so much to where there's an alien in his mom's basement somewhere on his computer and we're in this kind of simulation version. I'm curious for you to expand on how, on your version of how simulation theory could be accurate. So what do you think of us being in a simulation with the understanding that consciousness is fundamental?
Right. So the standard view, like Nick Bostrom's view of the simulation theory, is a physicalist one. So we aren't the reality. We're just someone's program. Some hacker at a lower level has created this, and we're fictions in that. But that hacker herself is a fiction in someone else's lower level, and so you could have this nesting. But at the very bottom, in the standard view, there's a physicalist spacetime.
Base reality.
Base reality is a physical spacetime. So what I'm saying is not that kind of simulation theory at all. Space and time are not fundamental. Space-time is doomed. So any simulation theory that assumes that space-time is not doomed is doomed. That theory itself is doomed. And second, that version of simulation theory assumes that somehow a physical system, like a computer, a program, it's unconscious, will give rise to consciousness. There is no scientific theory anywhere that shows how that could be. There's nothing on the table, as I mentioned earlier, that can show a specific pattern of circuitry or software in some AI that would give to it rise to a specific conscious experience, like taste of chocolate or something. There's nothing on the table, never been done. And again, the people who are doing this, many of them are my friends and colleagues, they're brilliant. If it could be done, they would have done it. It can't be done. And the reason it can't be done is because space-time isn't fundamental. They have the wrong foundation. So when we get that sea change, when most scientists realize what a few scientists now know, that space-time is doomed, then we'll start to make progress. We'll let go of the reductionist approach.
Yeah, I would love for you to speak to, and this is where actually I love a dear friend of mine, Clee Irwin, founder of Quantum Gravity Research. I don't know I think you're familiar or connected with him.
Yes.
I'm very intrigued by the self-simulation hypothesis because it definitely is in alignment with more of what we're speaking to here. So how then do you view simulation essentially being on a conscious agent basis?
Right. So it would be different than the Bostrom thing. It would now be consciousness is fundamental, and consciousness is infinitely complicated. And the one consciousness appears to be projecting itself and looking at itself from different perspectives. So space-time is a particularly simple perspective that it seems to be taking. We think of it as fantastic. I think of it as probably one of the cheaper headsets that the one is using to take a look at itself. There probably has other headsets where it's 1 billion dimensions or 1 trillion dimensions. We have 4. So that's why I think we're one of the lower level perspectives that the consciousness is taking on itself. And it's looking at itself, and so it gets a simulation, so to speak, which is as complicated as this seems, it's trivial compared to the complexity of the one. Absolutely trivial in a couple ways. So first, in our mathematical model, it's dynamics. It's Markovian dynamics that we have for consciousness, but it need not have an arrow of time.
Right.
It's what we call a station. It can be a stationary Markovian dynamics. But it turns out that when you take a projection of a stationary Markovian dynamics by conditional probability, so you get the dynamics projected to a dynamics where you've lost a little information about the original dynamics. So it is a dynamics. That projected dynamics will have an arrow of time. It's a theorem. And the arrow of time is a result of the loss of information in projection. So what this means is, in our simulation, the arrow of time is not an insight into a deeper reality at all. It's entirely and completely an artifact of the projection. And by the way, time is the fundamental limited resource in evolution. If you don't get enough food in time, you die. If you don't find mates in time, you don't reproduce. Time is the fundamental limited resource. But time is an illusion. The arrow of time is an illusion. So that's why I say I love evolutionary theory. It's for evolutionary biology, it's beautiful. I use it. And every aspect of it is not deeply true. All of it, including the arrow of time and the limited resources and organisms competing, all of it is entirely an artifact of projection of a deeper reality in which there are no limited resources and there need not be any competition. So that's why, so now that gets to, I have all this to really say what I think about simulation. Notice what I'm saying. The simulation is not truly a simulation of the deep properties of reality. Everything that we're seeing is an artifact of the projection. Competition, limited resources, none of that is deeply true of the one. All of it is only an artifact of our projection. So the simulation, typically we think of a simulation as being a model of the truth of the thing that we're trying to simulate. This is entirely artifactual. And the one completely, but the spiritual traditions have been saying this for, again, thousands of years. What can be said?
Right.
is just is not the thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And the Sanskrit term Maya refers to this, this illusion that if we become so enchanted with the sensory realm that we take it to be the real thing, that we don't close our eyes and go inwards, we don't actually have the chance to touch truth, who we are in our innate essence, that's unchanging, that can't die, that conscious being. So what's your view on who we fundamentally are then? Do you see consciousness as the self?
In a word, yes. I think, and again, as a scientist, I'm always going to be cautious. And,
Of course.
These are my best ideas so far, and words.
And I'm bringing you to the fringe, the edges here.
And words are just words, and even mathematics is just mathematics. But given those hedges, my current view is that you and I are the same. It's the one in an avatar talking to the one in another avatar, and so it's the one looking at itself through different avatars. But it's the same as the true of my cat. And the other avatars, in my headset, I don't see the consciousness when I see a rock. I am interacting with the one, but my headset's not allowing me. That perspective on myself isn't giving me that much insight into myself. So that's sort of the view that I take. It is the one. The one is infinitely complicated, and any thought that I have about myself, or any perception that I have about myself, is merely a perspective, merely a projection, and is not the final truth. The closest we get to final truth is when we let go of that completely. All perceptions are just in a state of meditation in which it utter interior silence. That's the closest that we get, and perhaps even deeper than that in like slow wave sleep.
There's just so much overlap with what you're sharing in these Eastern traditions and Western traditions that, when you look at karma and how this may be, a little bit on the fringes of esoteric for some people, but I think that a lot of people can feel this intuition that maybe we took birth in this life, in this incarnation with, and chose a specific curriculum almost, like a specific set of experiences in this display of VR headset to reveal to us, to encounter the people, the relationships, the circumstances, to reveal where we're still limited, where we still have judgments, and then to ultimately come to realize the true nature of who we are and really what we are. And so I'm just curious, how do you see the potential of us and really the one or source kind of differentiating itself, like you spoke to, in these many different perspectives to then reflect back to itself and go on that process of evolution?
Well, that's what I think roughly we're here for is
I saw it first.
the one. It seems that it may be a theorem that no system can fully model itself, fully understand itself. If you have, just take a Connex system. If it tries to understand itself, then it's going to build a little, like a program where it's representing itself. Well, in the process of representing itself, it's gotten more complicated, right? Because it's changed from the representation. So now it needs to represent its representation. And you get in this infinite loop, and it turns out no system can ever fully understand itself. You can only understand projections of yourself. So, maybe, and this is, again, I'm in well above my pay grade here. but maybe, I mean, I think all of us are. But it's interesting. I am the one, but I am the one dealing with a pretty tiny space-time headset and a lot of restrictions on the intelligence that's coming through. So from this perspective, all I can say is maybe the one is taking these different perspectives because it must. It's sort of mathematically forced that this is how the one knows itself. And it knows itself by losing itself in a perspective and actually fighting itself. People fight and kill each other. We have wars, religious and national wars and so forth. So that's total unconsciousness. We're really unconscious about our true nature. But then a gradual waking up, and in some sense, going through that unconsciousness and waking up gives you somehow it's a deepening of the understanding of the true nature of self. I am not all this stuff. I let myself think I was for a long time, and I let myself experience the suffering that comes from that. And that suffering helped me to wake up from it. And then I have come to understand myself at a deeper level. And this may never end, in the sense that it is the nature, it's the nature of the beast that ultimate self-perception can never happen. It's always this kind of process.
That wheel of
But I don't know.
Yeah, that wheel of samsara. I mean, we're speaking into, I think it's ultimately more important to identify with your ignorance than claim what you think you know. But these are important things to discuss because it feels like with the understanding that we kind of are playing out the necessary drama in our life to garner the experience and information to go on that process of awakening, it's less of like a learning, but more of like a remembering and a realization to just what is. And I think that so many people and us in this conversation in our own lives go through periods where we really identify with the headset, with our experience. It's very enchanting. It's very real. The relationships that we have, the delicious food that we taste, the love that we make, all of it. It's very enchanting in this very real experience of life. And yet, when we kind of come back into realizing who we are beneath it in our true essence, then it frees up so much. And so I want to speak into a little bit of the moral implications really of this understanding, because when you see and you experience the display of your experience is very much that. It is a display, and when you close your eyes, the display goes away. I went maybe 6 months ago and I did a darkness retreat where it was completely black, pitch black, dark for 6 days. I didn't see anything. Wow. And so when you come back and you open your eyes, like, whoa, the VR headset comes back on, you're like, it's fair. It feels very much like that. It rings really true in my body. So you come to that place where once you realize that your perception of reality is literally detached from objective reality, then that has so many implications of you clinging less to your ideals and beliefs, and it can release so much separation and division between humans, which leads to so much war and hate and killing. And so I'm just curious for you to share the implications that this has on how we carry ourselves in the world.
Great point. Ultimately, each of us is infinitely precious and infinitely intelligent. Unbelievable. Each one of us is the deepest reality, the deepest truth, and the deepest love that is possible. Each one of us. From the president or king to the beggar. All of us. And equally. There's no distinction. Most of us are spending our lives completely ignorant of who we really are, and of the unconditional intelligence, the foundational intelligence and love that we really are. And so we try to, most of our lives, to make up for that by money, or position, or status. My car is better than your car. My house is better than you. I look better than you. Whatever it might, or I'm worse than you. I'm special because life has treated me so poorly. And we're looking. We spend most of our lives looking to be special. And we don't realize that you don't need to look. You are that infinite. The infinite already is within you. It's about waking up to that infinity that's already within you. So, I'll say just a little bit on a political and economic level first. Communism versus capitalism. Communism sounds really great. From each according to their ability, to each according to their ability. And for enlightened people, that would work. Or not. So capitalism is what you need to do when you have unenlightened people, because now it's me competing with you, and so so communism should work, but it doesn't, and we tried it. It's spectacular. Capitalism, I'm not going to say it's a spectacular success, but it sure beats communism. But it works because we are all competing against each other, and we think of, I don't think of you as me, I think of you as a competition. I'm competing with you for status, for food, for whatever I'm competing. Whereas the spiritual traditions tell us, love your neighbor as yourself, because your neighbor is yourself. And ultimately, all morals come down to this: understanding that the other is you. When you really understand that the other is you, then you will act morally. Until then, when you don't understand that, you will act selfishly, and it will be only, it will be very hard to act morally. So that's the foundation of morals, is really recognizing that the other is me, the one, the infinite.
Yeah.
The infinitely precious in a different avatar.
Yeah, there's really no need for morals if you experience other as self. You don't need to teach you to hurt somebody else if you experience them as a part of you. It's like we said with a drop in the ocean. When you start to experience the magnitude of the ocean as you are divinated into a drop, it's like so much of what we think we would have to force to have happen would just dissolve away once we experience that kind of unicity with other people. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what happens to consciousness after the physical body dies.
I'll just say one thing more about
Sure.
this, and then about what happens when the body dies. Part of being moral is also having compassion on yourself, because all of us are caught up in the illusion. I mean, I'm talking as though I'm not. I am. I automatically get into competition driving on the freeway up here. I mean, automatically it gets triggered. So part of what's the waking up process, waking up to who you are, is completely accepting that I'm most of the time asleep. And most of the time I'm feeling this illusion of separation and competition and so forth. And part of it is for some reason, that's part of what the one needs to go through to understand it. It really needs to go through that illusion, that separateness. It needs to have compassion on itself, not to judge myself and also not to judge others. So letting go of judgment of myself and others is absolutely critical. But now, what happens after death? And of course, I don't know, but I can just speculate, talk to what my theory would say and a little bit of data that we have from out-of-body experiences. Space-time is just a headset, and my body is just an avatar. One way to think about what we're doing in life right now is just think about yourself when you're in a VR game. You put on a headset, you're immersed in Grand Theft Auto, for example. There are two ways that you could be in that world. One is, I know I'm wearing a headset, and I'm just having fun. I'm just playing this game, no great shakes, crash my car, no big deal. Another one is I get into the Grand Theft Auto game and I forget who I am, and I am now my avatar. And I'm threatened now. I mean, I'm identified with my avatar, I'm identified with my car. If the car gets crashed, I'm screwed. And so all of a sudden there's this clinging and there's this desperation and there's this fighting. So there's two ways that you could play the VR game. One is I'm enjoying the ride. Of course, I'm not in the game. That's just my avatar in the game. The other is, no, everything matters. I gotta win, So, when you step out of the game, if you never lost yourself in the game, it's no big deal. Take the headset off, move on. But if you've been identified with the game, taking the headset off is going to be a bit of a shock, right? It's going to be a bit. So in some sense, the idea is to die before you die. Face death. Really face the fact that this, what I call my body, is not me. It's just the avatar. That's not who I am. I'm not 3 pounds of brain producing consciousness. It's not what's happening. If I looked inside my skull, I would find a brain. But that's because I rendered a brain. It doesn't exist. I have no neurons right now. If you look inside, you would see neurons. But there are neurons that are causing none of my behaviors because I don't even have neurons right now. They don't even exist. They get rendered on the fly when you look. So brains cause none of my behavior. But if you look inside my skull, you would see brains. That's where rubber hits the road, where I'm really saying what this means. So when you really understand that this is just an avatar, then dying is basically just taking off the headset. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm more spiritually accomplished and attained than I am. If someone put a gun to my head right now, I'd be scared to death. Plain and simple. Because there's an intellectual understanding of this stuff, and then there's a rewiring of your emotional system that takes time.
Yeah.
And I'm in the I meditate and so forth, and I see, and that I've mentioned earlier, having compassion. I have to do that for myself. There's a part of me that knows I'm just an avatar. This is just an avatar. But there's an emotional part of me that is desperately attached to the avatar, and so. I see that in myself. It's very helpful for me to then be compassionate with other people that are completely identified and striving and competing and having the resulting amoral behaviors and so forth that come from that. So long answer, but I would say is taking off the headset. What is it like? The closest I can come to is it's like when you go and you do meditation and just awareness without anything. But it may be even closer to like slow wave sleep.
Is your intuition, by the way, I just loved everything you just shared. That was incredible. Is your intuition that any of the content carries over with you? As you, in some Eastern traditions, death is kind of analogous to like taking off a tight shoe. And you kind of release like the personality. Do you feel like that consciousness could then just go back into the one? It could take on another headset and with completely different content experience, or is your intuition say that maybe someone who actually does? And when I say you, your experience, your memory, do you feel like any of that could carry over? And is there any evidence that that could be possible?
My guess is that it could be lost. And that the one, which is what I am, is right now experiencing all 7 billion, 8 billion people on the planet, and all millions of cats, and all the amoebas, and everything. It's all there. Right now, I'm not the eye that's, so now, in some sense, it's the eye, the avatar eye that's speaking. I'm not experiencing all that. I, as the one, am experiencing, but that's been filtered out from the experience I'm having right now. It would be overwhelming. But I think that, so I am all that. I am your experience. I'm everybody's experience. But it's filtered out right now. But I am the infinite, and you are the infinite. And so my experience is actually your experience, and none of it's ever lost. And it's really hard because as an avatar, it's hard for me to. I've put on these restrictions. I've put on these. I can only, to be very concrete, I can imagine a three-dimensional object like a cube. I cannot even imagine a four-dimensional object. Try to imagine a four-dimensional cube.
Tesseract.
Yeah.
Art.
Or a five-dimensional cube. Nothing happens. I try to think, but nothing happens. Or try to imagine a color you've never seen before. Nothing happens. These are like trivial attempts to go beyond my little projection. Can't do it. So, but I know, for example, that pigeons have 4 color receptors. Presumably, pigeons are seeing a dimension of color that I can't even imagine. And there are some women that have 4 color receptors, tetrafems. So there are these women that have color experiences that I can't imagine at all. So my imagination in this little avatar is greatly projected. But the infinity that I am will be unleashed when I step out of this projection.
It's just that beautiful realization. We're seeing less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum, and we think that it appears that we have a great sense on how reality is operating, but when you start to dive into a lot of this stuff, you realize it's so limited, so limited.
Absolutely. Even when you just look at the electromagnetic spectrum, which is inside space and time. So space and time itself is just a trivial headset. And within that trivial headset, we're only seeing this tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum that would be available inside that. So and the one that we are, I can't overemphasize how infinite you are. And I'll just say a little bit about that. Infinity is not one thing. So mathematics tells us that there's infinitely many sizes of infinities. So the smallest infinity is the counting infinity. 1, 2, 3, 4, up to infinity. That's what they call Aleph zero. That's infinity. It's the tiniest infinity.
Charge from the leaves, it can somehow knock out the electrons I added to them. But why is ultraviolet light so much better at doing this than red light? This new puzzle became known as the photoelectric effect. The ultraviolet catastrophe and the photoelectric effect were big problems for physicists, because neither could be understood using the best science of the time. The science that said quite unequivocally that light was a wave. All around us, we see light behaving in a perfectly common sense, wavy way. Look at the shadow of my hand. It's fuzzy around the edges. We understand this as the light hitting the sides of my hand and bending and smearing out slightly, just like water waves around an obstruction. Perfectly common sense, wave-like behavior. And here's something else, something rather beautiful. Look at these soap bubbles. Shine a light on them and gorgeous colored patterns emerge from nowhere. And this was easily explained if you accept that light was a wave, reflecting off the outer and inner layers of the thin soap film and breaking up into the colors of the rainbow. Rather like ripples on the surface of water, light was simply ripples of energy spreading through space. And this was as firmly accepted as the fact that the Earth was round. But although this wave theory worked perfectly well for shadows and bubbles, when it came to the ultraviolet catastrophe and the photoelectric effect, the wheels started coming off. The problem was this: how could light do this? To truly grasp how absurd this phenomenon was, it might be useful to consider how waves in water behave. This is the wave tank at the RNLI's headquarters in Dorset. It's used to train lifeboat teams to deal with a range of different kinds of water waves. First, small waves, just 30 centimeters high. These waves don't have much energy, hardly enough energy to knock this top can off the other. But when the waves grow to over 1.5 meters, it's a very different proposition. And they're really throwing me about. There's no way I can keep this can balanced on the top. It's clear what water waves are telling us. Bigger, more intense waves have more power. They easily knock me and the cans around. So if light was a wave, more intensity should knock out more electrons. But that's not what happened. Remember, no matter how intense the red light was, it still didn't budge electrons from the metal. But weirdly, weak ultraviolet worked within seconds. So thinking of light as a wave just wasn't adding up. To resolve this, someone needed to think the unthinkable. And in 1905, someone did.
You may well have heard of him. His name was Albert Einstein.
This is the Achenhold Sternwarte Observatory in Berlin. Perched on top is a strange, huge iron and steel construction. But it's not a gun. It's actually a telescope. Built in 1896, the telescope was one of the largest of its kind in the world and made the observatory the go-to place to engage and astound the public in new science. Albert Einstein gave a very famous public lecture here on his theory of relativity, which is, of course, what he's most famous for. But it's not the work that won him the Nobel Prize.
In this video, I show you how to use templates in CapCut. If you're new to the channel, please